Okay, the next item on the agenda is to review and act on Article 14, Citizens Petition regarding polystyrene. And we have Ramesh Razdan. Is Ramesh here?
Good morning. My name is Ramesh Razdan. This is a follow-up to the Article 14 that we did. Apologies, I think we wanted to be here. Somehow the process didn't work out and we were not here. So now this is a makeup. As you saw in the town, there was a big debate on this. And one of the key items that was open was around Board of Health. So we wanted to collaborate with this team to figure out how do we make it successful. I think it is clear from all the discussion that I have with the number of town members that everybody wants to enforce this. Most towns are going in the direction, but there are some open questions, and we wanted to collaborate with you. How do we actually make that happen? And so I think if you look at styrofoam in overall, I don't know of a material which is from its creation to from its destruction causes problems all the time. When we build it, you use non-renewable energy. When you consume it, it releases styrene. When you destroy it, it causes problems. And when it goes away, it never goes away because it stays there for 500 plus years. So I think we, as being responsible citizens, the only goal for me, I'm not really an environmentalist by any chance, but I actually read through this process as a responsible citizen, and the kids have done a fantastic job to educate the community and drive it forward. I also already saw school committees taking steps towards maybe removing it. They're doing a workshop, and we might collaborate with them to make it happen. I think we can go multiple directions here today, this morning. We can give you a quick recap, and these kids are here, as you can see, to what the talk is about. We can go and demonstrate some of the products we have seen which are equivalent quality that actually can be enforced. Or we can talk about some of the open questions you might have that we can work on. How do we actually make it successful? I would like to get your guidance, where you want me to proceed ahead. Because I think most of you probably have some education, but if you want us to refresh, I think we have kids, they can come up and...
We're all town meeting members, so I think we're all set.
So that's why I didn't want to bore you with the same presentation again.
And the kids did a great job. I think my thing, speaking for myself, was the Board of Health seemed to be the enforcer, but we never had an opportunity to talk, and we never had an opportunity to talk with our Worcester people to sort of figure out when does that happen, what does that look like.
No, apologies. As I said, that was not the intention. Somehow it fell through the cracks, and I think it's okay. It is what it is. We acknowledge that. We did send some pre-information to all the board members a few weeks back about we modeled it on Amherst, and Amherst has been enforcing it for 4 or 5 years. There's a statewide ban which has description how to enforce it. But I'm sure there are open questions. So I am here to work with this team to kind of figure out how do we make it process, what can we do to help, or what questions are...
So for me, that's what has to be.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess one question I had was, is this proposed bylaw, is this verbatim from the Amherst bylaw?
Yes, we cut and paste most of that from Amherst.
Okay. I guess one question that Phil Legere from the Worcester Division of Public Health had to do with Section 6 on enforcement. In paragraph A, it says the health department or its designee shall inquire on an annual basis regarding any food establishment's compliance with this bylaw as a condition for renewal of the establishment's food service permit. So I think, and if you guys from Worcester want to chime in, that's fine, but I think Phil's concern was that it makes it sound like during their annual inspections, if there's any, let's say, violation of the bylaw, then they don't get their permit renewed on the spot. In other words, I think Phil's attitude was that we tend to like to give people like a second chance to be able to deal with compliance issues, and we were wondering if the Worcester Division of Public Health had any feeling on that, or...
Yeah, completely, in line with what Phil was saying last time. We just feel like, there's certain things we need with the food code to get in at renewal time, different food protection managers or certifications, but this, just tying this to it, right now wouldn't really, you know.
So we don't have any other communities in the collaborative that have Styrofoam?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
And are you saying that you feel like the people doing the food inspections, that this is out of their,
Yeah, I think so.
so you feel like food inspection shouldn't include?
I feel like it should be, like the plastic bag ban, not, you know, tied to the food safety.
Tied to
That's
the
kind of what we look at.
establishment to just?
Yeah, yeah.
And that you wouldn't, if you're in there looking at whatever their refrigerator temperature, you're not necessarily going to be like, hey, they have Styrofoam here.
So we're not gonna, so you
You're
can't
not
sell
going to
it.
write a violation for you have Styrofoam.
We don't have one, I mean, obviously right now, you know, it's not in the code,
That
so
creates
that's the
anxiety
problem.
for me if we're saying the Board of Health is the enforcer, because
Yeah.
it sounds like we're not really thinking we're going to be the enforcers.
Also, it'd be quite challenging, as Abby can attest. We have almost 200 food establishments in this town. There is no way possible to go in and do an inspection for all of those people in December. We see the food inspections are done throughout the year.
Yeah.
They're not done every
Yeah.
December. The inspections are done based on how they're categorized from a risk perspective.
Right.
You know, prepackaged food at a gas station, for example, doesn't carry the risk as some of the sushi places. So each food establishment is inspected 1, 2, 3, 5 or more times a year, depending on complaints and, you know, whatever else might be going on. So it's not like it's just inspected before the permit's issued. That's not how it works
Right.
at all.
Like, we could check it, you know, when we're there,
Check it
but,
when you're there.
I don't see how it would work at the beginning of the year tied to the food permit.
And bags is sort of, the onus was on the establishments, and I think Board of Selectmen is
The Board of Selectmen enforce that bylaw.
But there's nobody out there looking, and then the onus is on sort of the public to sort of say, hey, I got a plastic bag.
I've only had one instance where somebody came in that it was a plastic bag, but it was within the
Within the-
standard of the grade
Yeah.
that was acceptable. It's not been an issue at all that I've seen.
So, so I've got a few thoughts here. First of all, I think you guys did a great job at town meeting, and I think it's a great idea. I do think whether not to have a ban, that's obviously a decision of town meeting, and that's within the scope of authority of town meeting whether in fact Shrewsbury should have a ban. I do have the issue with the enforcement for a couple reasons. First of all, again, I see this more similar to the plastic bag ban than I do a health issue. And I feel like the purpose of inspections in Board of Health is to make sure that that food establishments are safe as far as from a health code perspective. Sure, there are probably some reasons why polystyrene is probably not a healthy thing. There's some arguments about that from a long-term perspective, but I think as far as what the Board of Health is concerned about and what the health department is, it's more about immediate threats. It's not like the Board of Health is going to ban certain foods that are unhealthy for you long term, right?
Yep.
And I kind of see that as that issue. So I feel like I think probably enforcement is best given to the Board of Selectmen, I think, in line with the plastic bag ban. I'm also just thinking of the regulation itself and what it prohibits. So the regulation prohibits the dispensing of prepared food to customers, right? So if you're doing your health inspection, right, the annual inspection, and the restaurant has polystyrene containers, it's not against the law or against the bylaw to have the polystyrene containers. They might want to use them for food prep purposes. The only action that's being prohibited is dispensing food to customers. So if you're doing your inspection and the establishment has polystyrene containers, that's not a violation.
Right.
So again, so therefore I'm not sure what the Board of what the health department is going to do. I guess they can inquire when they do their inspection annually and just say, hey, just remember you're not supposed to dispense food in any polystyrene containers. Okay, and they go, okay, great. Just like that's just kind of an FYI. But again, I don't think they'd be able to to find a violation at that point, unless they happen to walk in when someone's buying food in there and they happen to witness it being sold in polystyrene. But again, I think even if they were, I feel like that's a violation of a bylaw that the town, that the Board of Selectmen should enforce through that, through that line of authority, and not, I don't see it like a tobacco violation.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I think it's all very valid points, and as I said, we modeled it on Amherst, and I think we have seen other towns also kind of follow that. And the statewide ban is also asking Board of Health to enforce. If you, the email that we sent, the pre-read, I think because part of that, it is a health issue. At the end of the day, it's a health issue. I understand from an implementation, so we would like to get your insight. Maybe it is to inquire about, are you disposing of, are you delivering food in, like you just said, is in those things. So maybe some verbiage can be changed to affect that, and the Board of Select. So I guess maybe, I think we all believe this is the right thing to do. The question is how now, right? And we need guidance from you. If we believe that the verbiage should be changed to reflect that when Board of Health does their normal routine checkup, they will inquire about this as well. I think that's what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Well, I guess ultimately it's up to town meeting to pass whatever bylaw they think is appropriate, and we don't, whatever the bylaw says, if the bylaw requires the health department to do X, then the health department has to do X. That's kind of how it works, right? I mean, we can just give our opinion that perhaps, at least I feel that it should be enforced in a similar manner to the plastic bag ban, and I don't believe the health department has anything to do with that at all.
Right, my concern if people have to what do I do once I ask the question? What's my role?
Yeah.
What's
and I'm
my
sure
role?
Carrie isn't excited about having to enforce another bylaw as well, but
we have one full-time health inspector for the entire town of Shrewsbury, to put it in perspective. And Abby is here 4 days a week. That is just one type of inspection that she does. Board of Health basically covers everything. Nuisance complaints, housing, et cetera, but I think what Phil was saying is that he thinks it's a good idea, but like Jordan said, fashion it after the plastic bag.
Right.
Non-criminal charges, not tied to the renewal of a food permit.
I mean, the plastic bag ban seems to be working based on the fact that you're not having many complaints, so I think it could certainly be just as effective without bringing the Board of Health and the Health Department into it. But again, that's up to town meeting and whoever wants to create the next citizens petition around this.
No, we are ready to take it forward. Obviously, we have not had a chance to connect with you, so we wanted to get your point of view. So I understand. I think all valid points, and we will kind of, based on your consultation, based on the feedback, we can incorporate. It is just how do we actually drive a behavior change in some cases. It's not about, and I agree with you, it's not, if the styrofoam trays are there, there's nothing to enforce because you could still be selling them for cold meat or other stuff, right, which will be fine.
Yep.
I think we have to figure out, like, maybe we make some verbiage changes and come back to town. At the end of the day, it is the town's choice to help us move it forward. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you know more specifically how towns like Amherst are enforcing it? Is it tied to their food permit? Is it, health inspector goes out in December or January and does all the inspections and then issues tickets, or how does that work?
As I said, we completely modeled it there. We have not called them personally. I think Phil had asked me to send all the details, so I sent. I don't know whether he was saying he was going to call them. We don't have all the connections to the town people to really do that, unfortunately. We could, maybe as a follow-up to do that. But I would say this is 100% modeled on Amherst.
It might help for you guys to call. It might help for you guys to call out and talk to the equivalent food inspector person. Say, what happens when you see?
Right, because I'm sure
they might be storing stuff like you don't know.
Right. Yeah. I just
I think you need more information about. Especially Amherst is a decent size. So how many food inspectors do they have? Oh, everybody's coming
I'm
up.
wondering how they
managing it.
Yeah.
Even when you find people, it's just like tobacco, Somebody has to issue the ticket, somebody has to write the correspondence, somebody has to keep track of if they pay, when they pay by. I mean,
Then there's usually
there's a lot of administrative piece on the back
like
end as well,
overgrowth or, you know, writing.
just like tobacco. Somebody's got to police that.
You want to say something?
And also, we visited different stores. For example, Chipotle is using this, and Be Good is using this.
Yeah,
Like
you know,
other-
and then, you know, and again, I think the you know, the intent is a very good one, you know, and certainly there are alternatives, but I think again, you know, the reason we're talking about it now is not about the, you know, the merits of the petition itself, but more about our thoughts about, you know, how it would impact the Board of Health and the Health Department.
Yeah, I think it would be good to know how somebody like Amherst or any other towns who have this ban, how the health department actually enforces it. As we've been discussing here this morning, it's very difficult for the inspectors to go in. Just seeing the styrofoam trays or containers is insufficient evidence to say that a bylaw has been violated. So it would be good to know exactly how that's done. And then again, even if we did, the conditioning the renewal of the food permit on seeing styrofoam being used, let's say for the first time, first offense, so to speak, I think from our perspective, it would be a little bit harsh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think so.
Especially I'm thinking for places, you know, that may not be able to, like corporate Dunkin' Donuts, I don't know, would they take the fines or would they change, you know, all of their packaging? I'm not sure which would be preferable to them.
It's probably coming.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
probably
I
coming.
think Duncan is switching their cups anyway.
yeah. I'm
Right, like
surprised
it's
they-
I'm
coming.
saving all of mine, by the way, because I like to put 'em on.
One question, maybe before, if the state ends up passing a ban to enforce it, like does the state give you relief that your staffing will be increased or whatnot, or like what would you do that time?
Abby's it.
Hold your
Do
breath
it
on
all.
that one.
Abby.
I'm just saying if that were to happen.
Unfunded mandate,
That
bingo,
doesn't
many of those, yes.
Mandated.
They say, here's the law, you worry about enforcing it, thank you, yeah.
If the state
Well,
were
and
to-
town could do that too. Town could have
You're right.
passed the ban, town could have passed the ban at town meeting, and the way it's written, Board of Health is
It's left holding the bag.
is the enforcer.
Whichever legislative body passes a ban, the Board of Health would be forced to deal with it as written.
Okay.
I don't think we can modify it. If either the state or the town meeting decides to pass the bylaw as written, so.
Right. In our role as town meeting members, we can stand up and say,
Right.
suggest an amendment to the bylaw when it's presented again, if it still has Board of Health as enforcer, if we feel like we can't accommodate.
You can make the case, just like,
Yeah.
Jordan has made so far.
Yeah, Jordan can make the case.
So I just had a really quick question. So say like this situation that you gave, we have a company or a restaurant that does have styrofoam in the back and they claim that they aren't using it or whatever. Do you have reasonable suspicion to go back and like investigate whether or not they're looking at selling that styrofoam with like the hot food that's maintained in the bylaw?
But that's not on our radar right now.
No. We're saying if we saw a situation like this arise where you saw the styrofoam and you're not sure what it's being used for, would that call for like a further like I don't know, like an investigation or a look into what they're
Today?
using? Not today.
No,
after
you
the
Like
mean
a
if there were,
reinspection
Like
if
if you
this were
pass
passed?
the ban,
Yeah.
if you pass the ban written that Board of Health, well,
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
I mean, I'm gonna guess that you guys aren't staffed to do proactive
Exactly.
investigations on something like a styrofoam ban, I mean, I'd want you guys to focus more on the raw chicken that's not
Yes, and
refrigerated
that's what
at
the,
the right
the temperature of the
something that
refrigerator.
creates like an imminent threat to people. So, I mean, I would think even with this,
Yep.
if this were passed as written, it just talks about during, the annual inspection, they're gonna
Right.
look for it. But I don't think that, I can't imagine they're gonna start
Yeah.
sending investigators and launching a sting operation because
No,
they may be
because-
concerned
I think
that,
this is-
that it's styrofoam.
Maybe it's being like misrepresented. I'm just saying that if we do have a situation where there is a restaurant that has styrofoam in the back, you guys said we'd just ask them. Couldn't it also be like enough suspicion enough to just like come again some other day to see how they're using that styrofoam?
Well, and I think that's the concern is
That's the
there's not
concern.
staffing for that.
There's no
There's
capacity
not
for
staffing
that.
for
yeah.
that.
I understand.
We're a party of one.
I mean, how many food establishments?
We're
do we have
just
in
under
Shrewsbury?
200 and growing.
200, and how many inspectors? One.
One.
That's shared amongst.
No,
I just
Abby
do, yeah,
is it
Shrewsbury,
for
and we do
Shrewsbury.
the nuisance, the camps, the pool.
It's like one a day, every day of the
Tobacco.
work week.
Yeah.
But is it reasonable to ask that we, as part of your regular checkups, which you're already doing, right? We add a verbiage which is you are comfortable with, that you will check on Styrofoam as well. And I think implications we can work on it. Maybe it shouldn't be a food permit revocation, but it may be first time it would be a fine or maybe $50, whatever. But do you see that as a feasible thing, or you see that as an additional thing?
I think she's saying that's an additional thing and probably not going to happen. And I think the concern is, what do you do with that? So you ask a question, but what is her role? And I think she's saying that logistically she doesn't have the manpower to manage that. Now, if it becomes, I'd like to get rid of Styrofoam, but we have to figure out how to do it. And you know, if it goes through town meeting as Board of Health being the enforcer, we have to revisit. But right now, I think we're sort of saying we don't have the capacity to even ask that question. I don't think asking the question helps. It just puts us,
Yeah.
it sounds like now we're responsible.
Right.
And really the message right now is
Yeah.
we don't feel like
Yeah.
right this second that we have the manpower to be responsible, even for a question.
Sure. And we're contracted for, as part of the collaborative,
Yeah.
for a certain set of services. So
Yep.
potentially this would be out of scope.
That's
and we'd have to
correct.
then,
Right.
revisit the contract. And there could be additional costs to the town, as far as
Yeah.
payment, as far as what we pay to be in the collaborative, in the,
Right.
in the regional thing. So there's
I
pieces
think
of
there's
the puzzle.
definitely a lot of space for us to move around who would enforce it or specific enforcement, specific things like the definition. But I think that something that I thought was really important was that looking through whatever the research we did, calling up businesses and talking to them, almost all of them don't need it. So we thought the major part that Board of Health would be involved in was or whoever it ends up being at the end of the day would be granting the deferments. And so you guys were talking about Section 6, I think it was about the whole revocation of a license or whatever. And that also could be changed if it's being too severe. But we think that what we noticed was that we would just need an enforcement agency to be oh, this person, because the deferments were saying if there was an undue hardship for a business, that under this it would be the Board of Health would decide these people get a year every year and could be renewed every year to get out of it. In which case, if they do get caught with this, they wouldn't get their license revoked because they're allowed to use it. And that's why we saw a few businesses that required it. There was a cake shop that used it for display cakes, and I didn't know how that would fall under here. So in that case, wouldn't it be possible, since most of the companies don't use it or are willing to switch over, would it be a big issue of potentially getting people in hot water if they already don't use it or could have their thing deferred? Under the after giving a deferment, would there be a lot of? Do you think there would be a lot of businesses that fall into this hot water?
I mean,
Not if they
probably
were
not.
properly educated and give them ample time. I think, and I know Phil is a big proponent of educating. Board of Health does not want to be seen as a punisher. We educate people, we help people, we want people to be successful. We don't want to be suspending, I don't feel,
Yeah.
suspending licenses because of a foam tray.
Yeah.
Raw chicken, I would worry about.
Yeah, and definitely
raw.
the time, like you said, I mean, bringing it back to Dunkin' Donuts, I don't know on a corporate level, they use so much styrofoam, which obviously not great, but still, how long would they need, to get that solved? And we have how many in town? 5 of them?
6.
Six. Other coffee, Boston Donuts.
Yep.
We can't just not
Even just
issue
Cumberland Farms.
Cumberland Farms not issuing all these establishments
7-Eleven.
permits.
Yeah, one thing,
Definitely
one
would
thing
be-
we have known is if what we modeled on, that's a great point, by the way. What we modeled on is Dunkin' Donuts is a epicon of using
Yeah.
their goal is to get rid of styrofoam by January 1, 2020.
All in all.
Right,
All
but
the
not,
town.
obviously,
And-
on January, it's not gonna be.
Yeah.
No, 2020.
2020. That's what
18 months out from here. So our model, when we put
That's
the
why they said
So we
Oh,
put,
nice, okay.
we modeled our bill to be effective next 18 months. We're not asking anything because, so we said, Dunkin', because we knew Dunkin' Donuts when we had called all
Yeah.
the businesses. We knew Dunkin' Donuts, even if you enforce them, what is the next step? Because it's a corporate, you're not going
Yeah,
to change.
that's my
The
concern, yep.
local store is not going to change the corporate. So we modeled it on Dunkin' Donuts because
Okay.
Dunkin' Donuts happens to be one of the big stores that uses it.
Yeah.
It matches the timeline.
Okay, that's good.
So I guess maybe I think the follow-up question, who will give deferment? Now let's assume that there is a question on enforcement, right? What I think we are saying is when you visit and what happens, even if your person finds it, we don't have capacity to do that. Maybe we do the but if somebody proactively wants to know I cannot do it and I'm not able to enforce it, I need a deferment. Who would do that in town anyway?
Well, I mean, that would depend on what ultimately is, if this is passed as written right here, then then that would be, it says here, the Board of Health, after a public hearing, may defer application of this bylaw for a given food establishment. So if this were to be passed by town meeting as written, then it would be us would have to make these decisions. If it's written a different way and the enforcement's given to the Board of Selectmen the way the plastic bag ban is, then it wouldn't be the Board of Health making that decision. I guess the question is it really, is the Board of Health the appropriate, are they the appropriate arbiter of making that decision? That's
Well, and I think you're right. If it does go that way, then we have to go back to the collaborative.
Yeah.
Once we decide how we're going to try to do it and figure out what the cost is, and the cost would be to the town.
Yes.
And it also, depending on what happens, that might take away Abby's time from more critical situations.
Or you need another
Housing,
body.
sewage,
Or you need another body or another, which is just going to cost,
You could
which is cost.
honestly have a full-time person just for food.
Yes.
So the plastic
I mean,
bag
it's
ban,
huge.
who would issue a deferment now? The Board of Selectmen? So they would go in front of the board.
But I don't think
No one's
anybody's
ever asked for one,
actively
right?
going out there looking to see if anybody's doing bags.
But no one's asked for a deferment, right?
No.
None. Okay.
And as far as we know, there's been no, let's say, enforcement action, so to speak, in regard to the plastic bag.
I don't even know who would issue the ticket. We don't, I mean, it's not like the selectmen sits at the, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
Even though it's their
So-
bylaw, there's not a physical employee that's going out to the, you know what I mean?
It's
I
like
haven't heard
it's
any
like
complaints.
a trust, it's
I
by
think
trust.
people really like
Yeah.
the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Would there be a possibility for so seeing as we found that not a lot of businesses even would have a reason for either a deferment or to violate the law, would a citizen reporting kind of thing where if people notice food being served in styrofoam, they could report that and then become an issue?
Right, that's probably your best bet. That's
Yeah,
probably your best
I mean, we
bet.
get all the complaints. And
Right.
they're
Would
tracked.
those complaints be still going to you guys, or would they go into whoever?
Well, again, it depends
Again, it's
on
whatever
how
you
it depends
pass,
on
right?
what's.
I mean, it's
Exactly.
whatever you want to,
I mean,
whatever
people-
town meeting passes.
Right,
It could
and-
be, town meeting could create their own, a whole new board if they wanted to, right? I mean, town meeting is,
The enforcers.
town meeting is the legislative body of the town. I mean, they have a lot of power.
Right.
So I'm just speaking
So
hypothetically.
I guess part of that is, the reason we are here is I think we all believe it's the right thing to do. And I think the second question comes is, how do we do that? And without we're also responsible citizens of Shrewsbury. So we don't want to create unnecessary burden to the town. The question begs is, how do we make it real, right? So we want to make sure we make changes to the thing that reflects how town can enforce it. And we have 18 months to do it, right? So it's not tomorrow. We can experiment it, we can learn it, we can grow it. But fundamentally, we all want to do that. I don't think
In other words,
Right, I
once you
think you
pass the
have to-
bylaw, it is the bylaw.
It
Sorry.
is, right. So I think you have to call communities, figure out what's working for them and how they do it. And the answer, because right now, as this bylaw is written, the health department shall inquire on an annual basis. This is a mandate passed like this, that the health department is going to manage this annually for every establishment. I think in the time before you come back, my thing is you got to call all those communities and say, how's it work? What happens? Does the community have the resources that they have a special inspector that just manages that? Is it the private citizen that is responsible, and what's the avenue for that? Does a private citizen call Carrie and Carrie does blah, blah, blah? I think that's the information that none of us really know how the other communities are doing it. We know that Amherst has it just like this.
Yeah. But we don't know how their health department is staffed. Are they
we
part
don't
of
know
a regional
anything about it.
collaborative? Probably
How
not.
many establishments they have, it'd be nice to see
Exactly, yeah.
kind of a comparable.
Right, maybe they have
population.
interns every year that are, through a program, who knows? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Maybe they stick their summer intern on
Yeah.
Styrofoam and,
I mean, my 2 cents are, just, I think, speaking as, just my opinion is, I would think the enforcement, if I were to draft a warrant article, for this topic, I personally would think that the enforcement should be similar to the plastic bag ban and not, in the purview of the health department. But again, that's for, whomever wants to draft the article and whatever town meeting wants to do.
So I think it would be useful to gather this information from the other towns, to see exactly how they're doing it. If it seems like the health department is the only way you think it can be enforced, I would at least ask that you could, reconsider the wording of the annual inspection aspect of it in terms of, withholding a food permit, which I think is a bit harsh. And I guess the only other question I had was, in section 4, prohibition, paragraph B, it mentions town facility users are prohibited from dispensing prepared food to customers in disposable food service containers made from polystyrene. So I guess I'm wondering, who does that refer to? For example, if somebody decides to have an event at the senior center involving food, and they would be prohibited from handing out the food to the people in styrofoam containers, for example.
It was primarily meant for school department.
Okay.
I think we started with the school, and I think there is other interpretation to do, which we need, maybe we need help to clarify that. Because generally, what we have seen from other towns, what I learned is one-time events generally don't actually cause that much of hardship. And we have a lot of ground to cover to get to a one-time event. So one-time events would not be there, so maybe we can clarify that, or maybe we can add some verbiage to do that, saying one-time events. There was a question about Dean Park, if somebody has an event and all that, what happens to that also?
Right.
Generally, those are exempt because
so
they are
then
one-time
maybe this
events.
has to come out.
They're not exempt. If it's a public event, they have to be inspected and permitted, and a temporary food event can be 1 to 14 days. Yep. And we do have, like, example, Spirit of Shrewsbury can run 2 or 3 days. That's
Okay.
something like that.
So, given that the phrase or whatever says customers in it, would that include an event where it's a community event, or would it only be if vendors showed up to Dean Park and were selling stuff in styrofoam? Because I think under that it would be more obvious to be okay, you shouldn't be selling things in styrofoam, especially if you're a local business or whatever. But if it were a community event where people
I see. So you mean if we have a vendor from an outside town coming in for Spirit of Shrewsbury or something, that we enforce this on this other town that may not have?
Yeah, I guess it revolves around the definition of the word customer.
Customer. Who is the customer?
Is somebody attending a senior center event a customer? I don't know, probably not, but
One thing that we had considered was adding the word paying before customers, so that would be referring to paying customers. So we were wondering if that was one thing that you might think would be a good idea to.
well, that could resolve the issue, because if we're talking about food trucks, for example,
Yeah.
then obviously they're doing this to make profits, so they'll be paying customers.
Right. So is that a thing that you think we should change in the bylaw? Just add the word paying before the word.
And then we could add a separate section
Is that
regarding what we would do
included,
for
food
One
trucks?
time.
I'm just thinking for out-of-town
One time.
vendors.
Especially the mobile food trucks.
Right, that's what I mean,
We
yeah.
get those all the time.
We have one
Other
coming from
communities
Northborough, which
outside of
happens
the
to like
alliance.
other towns.
Town facility users, so like you say, Dean Park, I don't know if food trucks don't ever go into Dean Park, I don't
They
think.
have to get permission first. Actually, no food vendors are allowed in any of the parks. Angela Snell, our Director of Public, the Parks and Rec, you'd have to apply with her department to get a permit to vend for a specific event. So that's funneled through her.
Senior center?
The what?
Who goes to senior center with food?
Well, if there was a cooking class or something like that in their kitchen.
But not an
Farmers
outside
market.
person that comes in.
No, well,
Not that I'm aware of.
what does happen, Representative Hannah Kane and Senator Mike Moore hold senior lunches for Thanksgiving and Christmas over at the senior center where they bring in food from an outside source,
Yeah.
like Assabet Valley, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They're culinary students.
But does anybody pay for using that space or pay for that food?
We'd have to ask Sharon Yeager. I don't know. I don't know.
Right, if all food is donated and I just come and get food, I don't know, that's all the stuff, I guess, that,
Bring your own bag, too, to carry it in.
not
No
plastic.
Do you know how plastic bag is enforced for things like other like a vendor
By
or
one-time
someone else
things?
coming in?
I don't know what Board of Selectmen, I don't know what their thing is regarding violations or,
You'd have to, Val Clemmy, the admin for Select.
so
could
that's
speak to
under
that.
Board of Selectmen
I haven't
manages,
heard anything about that.
enforces bags.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real emphasis on the plastic bag ban is, the stores themselves that are,
Yeah,
Haven't had an issue. Actually, a lot of the stores really like it. They've embraced it. I haven't heard any complaints at all.
So I just wanted to talk about like taking a step back and using sort of your idea of how the Board of Health should function in this like situation. So you guys said you guys want to educate more the public and have Board of Selectmen enforce. So my question is specifically, how did you guys educate the public about the plastic bag ban as compared, and what you could do with the styrofoam ban right now?
So by default, the Board of Health, AKA me, actually got elected for that because, we permit all of the food establishments. So I assisted and helped educating that, but we don't enforce it. So it's very confusing because once you put your name out there, everybody comes to us, but we just refer them back to the
so you sent an
Board of
email
Selectmen.
that said effective June 1st.
Yes, and
or-
ongoing, Abby and I take the initiative when new food establishments are coming in to let them know about it. We give them the flyer, and if they have any questions, we refer them to the Board of Selectmen.
How
It hasn't been
long
an
of
issue.
notice did you give all the
I can't remember, 6
Oh,
months?
it was, wow.
Okay, I'm just thinking if this.
It was
you know,
over at
gets pushed.
least a year.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they're adding
Yeah,
theirs
18.
January
Yeah,
2020.
yeah,
so
I just think, depending how long it would take.
if town meeting had passed in May, it would have been over a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
that's plenty of time then.
But didn't pass, so.
Go ahead, sorry.
I also had one question. If we realize that halfway through if it passes, if we realize that the bylaw could be changed for the better, would that be possible, or is that just not possible once it passes?
What do you mean? Once the bylaw passes?
An amendment to the bylaw, would that have to be voted on again?
Go back to
Then you
town
have to
meeting.
go back.
Yeah, you'd have to go to town meeting,
Start all over,
And-
right?
just like any other bylaw.
Okay, so another question we had was about school enforcement. So would that fall under the governing body who's given the power, whether it be selectmen or Board of Health, or would it fall under some other department like the school, the board themselves?
Again, whatever's written
Depends
in
on
the,
the-
whatever's
depends on
written in the article.
Right. So I'm saying, which one do you guys think would be the best for enforcing such policy?
Board of Selectmen.
Well,
Board of
there's
Selectmen, or
there's
the-
12 public and at least another 2 private, so, we issue food permits for all of those, but, we're not at the school every day, so I think Joe Sawyer would be the best one to ask about that.
School
I don't want to
committees.
really speak.
So
for
full
another
committee is
department.
already considering, I think they're doing a workshop on it. We will listen to that they might be thinking about to do anything. I think they will do, probably schools, they will automatically do it. I don't know whether we need to enforce it. I think it'll be mostly around the businesses. How do we actually enforce that? So if I hear it, do you have any other things that you wanted us to look at? So if I hear it,
think so.
what we want to do is that 29 towns or other towns that have passed, we want to get some real world information. What is that? How is that being enforced, and how much that is a work on the Board of Health? Is that a good understanding?
Yes, it is.
And I think the other one is around the word customer. We need to think about how do we reward it, particularly around one-time events and the paying customer, right? Those are the 2 things that we will go back and, what would be the forum to come back to this team with all that data?
We're here.
Another Board of
Just
Health.
just another Board of Health meeting.
Yeah.
down the
Okay, so
road.
we
How
will,
often are those?
so Carrie, we will reach back to you and kind of get the data maybe in a month or so.
Yeah, And I can, certainly let you know when the next Board of Health meeting is. If, once you have all that stuff, we would certainly have you come in. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then I think what Steve said, the third thing was trying to figure out the language, if Board of Health is going to enforce.
Yeah, that was it.
Untying
If we
to-
stay with the Board of Health as the enforcer, then, change the language in regard to the
Immediate withdrawal.
loss of the food
Food
permit upon
permit.
inspection.
Yep.
And the definition in section 4, right? So when there was like
Customer.
dispensing.
That's the
foods,
yeah.
maybe,
That's the
like,
customer.
Having, like only if you saw them actually like selling it, right? So we should change that as well. That it would be like with the intent to sell it or something like that.
So one other question that a lot of people have suggested, because we lost pretty close, we are actually attempting to go at a special town meeting, which is in September. So what, like for that to happen, any special thing that we would need, obviously we would want to come back with this information as soon as possible so that we can attempt for September. In the interest of, it's still 2020, so we're not going to change the timeline. It's just like give businesses time, gives them time to think about how do we actually enforce that. Anything we need to do from a Board of Health for that to happen, or whatever we are doing is good enough?
Well, somebody's going to have to write up exactly some verbiage and get that information out.
What do you mean? They have to, if they change the bylaw and then represent it, is that what you mean?
Yeah, we'd have, and as far as the education piece, I mean, that's another whole body of work. Posting on the website, sending
I don't think you
emails,
can
letting
do
the
anything.
corporations know, because a lot of these people have have a corporation and the local, so those, you want to make sure you're capturing all of.
So you are saying is if the town decides to approve it, post that, there is an education from whatever that.
Whoever has to enforce it should
Enforce.
be the educators.
Educators, yeah.
And the more upfront education, the less you should have to worry about enforcement, I would, if you're successful.
Yeah, I think you are going to the execution mode, hoping that this is all approved. I'm just saying is from now till September, anything we need to do for this, or whatever we came to this town meeting, or maybe follow-up meeting with the data, is that good enough for Board of Health? We obviously need to go to the Board of Selectmen as well to figure out how do we get into the process. But is there any guidance? Because we're going through this process for the first time, so we're learning as we go in a way. Any guidance, any suggestions for us?
Well, I think we talked about them.
Yeah.
I think we've covered pretty much what we're
Okay.
interested in getting. If you could, again, come back to another meeting and discuss the actual implementation issues in the other towns.
Okay.
And if you have any suggested, maybe give us ahead of time, any suggested rewording of the enforcement part of it.
Okay.
If it should stay with the Board of Health.
Right, when you call those towns, ask them, does their food inspector do Styrofoam at the same time? Do they have a separate person that does Styrofoam?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what's their staffing? How many restaurants or how many permits do they do a year?
Yep.
And what's their staffing
right. That would be
related
great
to
to know.
that? Do you know what I mean? Do they do 100 a year with 3 staff members? Do they do, and like, try to get as much as you can.
That would be great.
Okay.
Specifics, right? Because if they only, towns are different sizes and different work responsibilities.
So it would be for other towns, just to make sure, again, it would be who would we call, the town Board of Health?
Yeah.
There also?
I mean, if they're the ones enforcing it,
If
Amherst,
they're
then
the
yeah.
ones, if
Yep.
they're the ones, if you know that the Board of Health is enforcing, then call them. If you know the Board of Selectmen is enforcing in a particular town, call them.
Okay,
And
we will
same
do that.
thing, same questions. Who does it? How do you do it? What do you do when you see a violation? How do you work through it? Is it a fine? Do you withdraw,
Sure, we can.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Would you,
Thank you.
would you all just mind signing, just printing your names on the way out on our
Okay,
roster?
sure, we will do that.
Thank you.